So my name is Kimberly Culp. I'm an attorney at the law firm Venable. We are really excited to set the stage for you today for this VR track on really where we are with VR. I'll give everyone just a real quick moment to tell the audience who you are, and then let's get talking.
Sure. Hi. I'm Arun Karamcheti, and I head partnerships at Nord Labs. We're a startup based in Mountain View, about 20 engineers, and we work on positional tracking for virtual reality and augmented reality applications.
Hello, I'm Ashish Agrawal. I lead all of the VR and deep learning efforts at Matterport. We make a camera that lets you scan real-world spaces and reconstruct them digitally in 3D so that you can then experience them on mobile, tablet, phones, in VR as well.
Does anyone feel like we're at a football press conference? My name is Dany. I'm founder and CEO of Pixelbug, and we've been helping multinational brands adopt augmented reality since 2012.
Great, thanks. I wanted to really get back to basics and ask you guys if you can tell us where we are. Let's start with headsets and technology, hardware. Where are we? What's in the space? What are consumers using? What technology do you think is particularly exciting, sort of in the headset space? Let's start there.
Sure. So if you look at the VR headset space, I guess if you segment it, there's the tethered experience, and that's clearly the better experience, just because you have a strong, powerful processor to process. You have a better display piece that you can work with, and so over there the clear leaders are Oculus and the Vive headsets. Followed closely by, I'd say, the PlayStation VR, which is a console piece. And then on the other side, with mobile, you have the the Samsung Gear VR, Cardboard, and now Daydream, that are kind of on the other end of the spectrum. So these would be, I would say, the leading market leaders for tech.
Yeah, in terms of consumer adoption, I guess just to add on to that, so Gear VR and Cardboard have seen the highest consumer adoption. I think the latest numbers put the Cardboard adoption at about 10 million headsets out there, and Gear VR at about 5 or 6 million. Daydream has just gotten started. So in order to reach end consumers, the mobile-based VR ecosystem is a better bet. And when it comes to, as far as, is this loud enough now? Okay. Yeah. As far as room scale experiences with the Vive and the Rift, they tend to work really well with hosted installations, arcade types of setups. But to reach out to consumers, mobile VR is still the right place to start, at least for right now.
I want to ask you something about haptics. And the Ghostbusters comment really made me think about it. Where are we with haptics? And if Dany, perhaps too, you could help everyone understand what it is, and where do you think we're gonna go? Because it would be very cool to do Ghostbusters in haptics.
Yeah, well, getting tactile feedback from the experiences is a very interesting field of exploration right now. Some are exploring using gloves, some are exploring using sound waves to get sort of a response from the actual virtual objects. It's still very experimental now, but it is a very exciting field, definitely.
We've seen, obviously, with the Lytro camera that there's a lot more that goes into creating VR and AR content, at least on the hardware side to start with. We'll get into software and other issues in a moment. But can you guys tell us, if you're going to develop content, what other technologies are there out there that we're not always so aware of?
Yeah, so like most things, I guess, when we look at the variables fast, cheap, and best, you get to pick only two. And that applies to VR quite a lot. There are technologies that help you capture the spatial aspects and the temporal aspects, and spatially, I guess, as the previous speaker mentioned, the characteristics are whether it can do stereoscopic captures, whether it can capture depth, whether it can capture 360-degree views. So there are several of these elements by which the capability of various technology options that are available differs. At a really entry price level, there's these 360-degree cameras where I think the price point starts at a couple $100 that let you build 360-degree videos. And then there's the Matterport type of solution, which does not help you capture so much of the motion or the time aspect, but helps you capture the depth and the 360-degree views and helps you reconstruct stereoscopic views. There's more advanced solutions, some that have been announced by Facebook, like the Surround 360 solution, where they are going to come out with a specification that also lets you decipher depth once the 360-degree video is captured. So right now, there's lots of different solutions that have pros and cons at different price points that can help you capture content for VR.
So the other piece that I would mention is, just to add to what Ashish said. So the technology about, room scale, being able to sense where you're in the room, and SLAM, which is also called simultaneous localization and mapping, specifically using the camera technology to build an indoor map of the space where you're in, where you're interacting. So essentially, if you walk around the room, you know where you are, and so then you can interact with, virtual scenes in the object, in your application. And what we do is, also one part of the whole overall piece or puzzle, which is essentially we do controller technology, and this is also adds to the immersion aspect. So. Today, if you look at most of the mobile VR headsets, they are very limited in terms of what you can do for input. So if you look at the Gear VR, now they only recently came out with a 3DoF controller, but previously it used to be used to tap on the side for interacting with content. And even for the cardboard, you would do focus your gaze on a certain object to select something. So what we do is we provide an inside-out system where the camera is mounted on the headset. And we have controllers, and we provide what's called 6 degree of freedom or 6DoF input, and the ability to now interact, in space, with objects.
Thank you. For those of you who don't know what the cardboard is, and just indulge me for a moment, it's a really fantastic device where you can slip your phone into it, and you can have the experience for $10, $15. I've seen them as giveaways at conferences because they are so cost effective. So it's an interesting entree point, particularly for brands who are looking to have a VR, AR type experience and show their awareness with the space without having to spend a lot of money, which I think is an interesting transition to what I'd like to talk with you about for a moment, Dany, which is brands and getting into content creation. And just tell us a little bit about, first, the content timeline. If you're a brand and you want to do something in this space, what's that going to look like?
Yeah, so content is definitely the one of the bottlenecks in the development of the technology, and that's one that we've been trying to resolve for a very long time. So typically, if a brand wanted to develop an augmented reality app or a virtual reality experience, it would take between 3 to 6 weeks, depending on the complexity of the concept, from creative all the way to deployment. And so we've been actively trying to resolve for that. So by reducing the time frame it takes to develop the content and to reduce the complexity through an augmented reality CMS that we are currently in the process of launching. So typically that will reduce the time frame now to, let's say, 1 week from concept, where you can load existing assets, assign animations to that, and certain reward systems. There's a whole bunch of features in there, and then deploy it either through an existing branded application or through an app that we help deploy for the brands.
Thanks. I'll open it up to all of you. How can smaller independent publishers get involved in VR, AR? What are the entree points for starting to step the toe, into the water, if you will, in this technology?
I'll take that on. As far as I think it's a great inflection point as far as game development goes, and a very good entry point for independent game studios, and that's what we're seeing in the VR ecosystem today. That most of the original content that's coming out is being put together by these indie studios. In fact, we work with a few. There's like a lot of hardware companies in the valley, and it always comes to we have this great technology, but how do we showcase it? And we always have to reach out to game developers, and being a startup, we work with the indie guys because they're more cost effective also, and so basically trying to put content that really showcases what we can do here. And it's a tough business also for them, just because if you look, there's like a wide spectrum of technologies that are available, and from their point of view, they're trying to establish. They want to make sure that they are getting the best ROI for where they spend their effort and time, and they will obviously gravitate towards the technology that has the most install base. But then again, the challenge there is if the experience is suboptimal, if the display technology is not good and the controller technology is not there, then why spend the time there? So that's kind of the crossroads that they're at.
So as far as publishers are concerned, right, it depends that if you can either be a content publisher or you can be an experience creator. So if historically, if you would have seen, even to create a regular photosphere or a 360 pano, you had to deal with complex pano heads and DSLR cameras and fisheye lenses, and then there was a whole lot of post-production process needed in order to stitch those together, get the seams not to appear, the tone mapping right. So it was definitely not very accessible in the past. Now, with the emergence of a lot of 360-degree video cameras, the Ricoh Thetas, even the Matterport type of solution, a lot of this has become much more accessible, where all they have to do is, when they're in the field, they have to capture the content, and a lot of the post-production is automated to a great extent. When it comes to creating experiences, a lot of the ecosystem players like Google, Facebook, Unity, they're launching and making editing tools available, which bring the what you see, what you get type of graphical user interface paradigm to building some of these experiences, and they're making a lot of these tools available to democratize the experience creation aspects of it as well.
I want to talk about a development that happened this week, which is that Congress, I don't know if anybody knows, is looking into VR. I was in Washington, D.C. this week talking with someone who's part of the congressional panel to help educate our Congress on this technology that we're talking about. And as a part of that, we got into this interesting ethical question, which is, really, are there ethical concerns about VR? In particular, where we were was on the gaming side of things. The more real it becomes, when you think about the power of the technology in terms of the cognitive abilities to sort of change the way people think about things. There's science about helping the elderly feel less lonely, or teaching about implicit bias. When you have an intersection of creating a real life experience like the Litro tech that we saw in this technology, are there ethical concerns that we should, as leaders in the industry, be thinking about before we just sort of plow forward, if you will?
Yeah, I mean, there's always ethical concerns with any new technology. So we have to keep in mind the privacy issues, where now we're giving the companies and Congress or politicians the opportunity to see into consumers or people's daily lives, whereas before you could maybe track them or see what they're typing. Now you can actually view through their everyday lives and be able to capture data from that. So there's definitely a sense of responsibility that has to come with us to how to use that information responsibly.
Yeah. So personally identifiable information, I guess it takes a whole new meaning when it comes to VR, AR, and particularly as haptics start becoming more commonly available, where you can track body movements and even apply some deep learning techniques to try to understand posture and build signatures of how individuals behave, and then have greater ability, more data to track individuals. So from a privacy perspective, there's definitely a lot of implications that have to be kept in mind. And from an ethical perspective, just imagine, I guess, fake news will end up taking a whole new meaning in context of VR, where you end up identifying with it more, where you end up remembering all the content more, and you end up empathizing with it more than anything that you can make available in VR would be much more believable, regardless of whether it's true or false.
Yeah.
One other aspect that I want to add to this is, this has also been in the news lately about, some of these, immersive gaming experiences, or even you have these VR social, get-togethers, where women have complained of being harassed by others. And so that's something that needs to be addressed. And I think a company called Allspace VR, who's big in the social VR space, in fact, create this virtual bubble around you. So no one can get more than a foot close to you, or 2 feet, right? So I think that's kind of some of the things that you didn't even envision when VR was coming out. But as you start, as it starts proliferating, these things come to the forefront. You're like, that's mind-boggling. But yeah, that's true. So we have to be cognizant of these factors.
Yeah, great point. I want to talk a little bit about consumers. And VR it's been the year of VR for many years. And I think we're hoping that this is the year of VR. But what do we need to do to really make it the year of VR? What needs to happen to fulfill the promise of this technology for the marketplace?
So there are, I think, two aspects to it. One is, it has to be made accessible to the masses, right? I mean, Ashish mentioned that there's millions of these cardboard headsets that people are using, but then you try it on, you get the novelty aspect of the VR, but then you look at the your display on your screen, you have there's a screen door effect, and it's so limited in the experience that you just discard it, right? So we need something that sticks with the user longer. And so I think what's happening is, if you look at the industry, there are all these low-priced kind of headsets, all-in-one headsets that Microsoft is planning to roll out, and Intel is getting in on the game, and so is Qualcomm and others. And I think that's one piece of it, that you make the price point more accessible to the masses. The other piece, of course, is content. I have a friend who's a gamer, and he tells me that most of the content that you have in terms of the game stores today is really tech demos, and he really wants to have a full-fledged gaming experience title. And I think that'll come once the big game studios see that there's enough critical mass out there for them to go invest the money to go fund a game like that.
Yeah, and there's a matter of also broadband and bandwidth. Obviously, streaming this content is a lot heavier than video or pictures. So to make the experience a lot more believable and interactive, then the bandwidth needs to be able. So there's an infrastructure there that needs to also evolve. Also in terms of value add, oftentimes when we work with brands, and that was especially true at the beginning, they'd hear a buzzword and just want to hop on it and then be like, we want to innovate. Yeah, okay. We want AR. Yeah, okay. What does that mean? And so the technology is not an end by itself. It's a means to an end. It needs to fit into a campaign strategy, just like any other communication medium. Have objectives. What's the strategy behind it? Do you want to increase sales? Do you want to increase engagement? What's the result you want to achieve? Because the technology doesn't sell itself. And the misconception is, if you do AR, then it's going to be a big hit just because it's the buzzword. But that's actually detrimental for the industry, because it ends up, that's what turns it into fad. It's not the technology itself, but how people or businesses, especially true at the beginning, were the first to somewhat adopt and find and bring it to market, tend to not capitalize on the value that can be used behind it.
Also, instead of looking at this more as the year of VR, I like to look at it more as a decade of VR, because it's going to have a much longer gestation period. There's definitely lots of things that need to happen in the near term. So given that the hardware adoption on the content consumption side is still pretty low as compared to all the other types of devices that you look at, content creators and distributors need to start thinking of responsiveness of content in a different way. So now your content does not we are going to see the emergence of content that would work across modalities, regardless of whether you just have a mobile phone or you're accessing it on a computer, or if it's a mobile-based VR experience or it's a tethered room-scale VR experience. The same content can either progressively it enhances or it gracefully degrades, and you can experience the same content regardless across each of these modalities. Also, a lot of the basic constructs such as the UI, UX aspects, the distribution aspects, some of those barriers will drop in the near term. Just in case of distribution, web VR as an emerging technology is something that would help people consume a lot of this content right within their web browser and drop a lot of barriers for accessing content. But in terms of performance that it can support, initially it's going to start out supporting some basic experience, and over a period of time it's going to evolve into having the full tool set, the full functionality parity with what game engines offer. So in the near term, I see a lot of the basic aspects of consuming VR and AR content to drop before we start seeing everything that is hyped up in the industry. It's going to be at least a couple years before we see that.
I think there are some interesting solutions, to your point in particular, Dany, about the technology that might help move it forward. The technology application in architecture, for instance, if you're going to build a mansion, to be able to really see what that mansion looks like before you even begin construction. I'm curious if anyone's excited about the use of the technology to solve problems that might help propel the industry forward faster or better.
Yeah, that's a good point. Actually, we developed something like that for a big property developer in Dubai, where we created a 3D immersive walkthrough of an apartment unit of a building that wasn't constructed yet, and had audiences be able to wear Samsung gear and have a guided navigation tour of what that apartment would look like. And a lot of people said, thought it was for them was so realistic that they were asking when they could actually buy this, and that they wanted that exact same apartment. And we're like, yeah, but this is not going to be finished for the next 2 years. And so there's definitely that helps solve a problem, because they could actually see the view of the finished unit once it's complete, get an idea of the type of look and feel of the furniture that would be in there. And that helped drive sales and early bookings of off-plan units for this property developer.
Arun, Ashish, can you think of any similar applications that excite you?
So right now, we are definitely looking pretty actively into what, for the lack of a better word, we have started calling augmented virtual reality. So the whole concept of scanning a real-world space and then making modifications to it and then visualizing that in VR. So just imagine, there are oftentimes during home remodeling, there are some reversible decisions that you can make about, such as buying a piece of furniture, placing it in your home, seeing what it looks like. If you don't like it, you can return it back. But you cannot do that when you want to replace the flooring in your home, or if you want to repaint your home. Those are very expensive to reverse, even if you wanted to, but those are mostly irreversible decisions. So having the ability to scan a real world space and then visualizing what it would look like with new flooring, those are some of the areas where we are seeing application. Another is the architecture, engineering, construction domain. So there's lots of times that there are contractors who undertake projects that are going to cost millions of dollars, and oftentimes they scan the space first the way it looks like currently, and then they artificially augment it by adding synthetic objects or computer-generated objects to use that as a communications tool with their clients, and also as a planning tool to try to understand what kind of impact it would have. So we are seeing a lot of augmented virtual reality types of use cases as well.
Yeah, so if I may, the kind of applications that really excite me, and I see a lot of value in addition to the ones that my co-panelists mentioned, are in the medical space. And there's a lot of work on using virtual reality for rehabilitation of stroke victims. And they have seen that when these patients are placed in this virtual environment where they're actually seeing that they can be mobile and things, they see a tremendous improvement in recovery of the motor ability. So which is, I think, pretty impactful. And we also have a lot of folks reach out to us through a developer program, trying to develop applications for surgical training, for instance, using controllers, 6-stop controllers. So there's a many, I think the potential is humongous, and it's just a matter of trying to get some of these to a critical mass for the market to really take off.
So we have time for, I think, one more question, and not seeing any on the app, I'll finish it up. If anybody does have questions afterwards, feel free to hand them to me, and I'll make sure your panel gets those answered. Oh, I don't. So my phone apparently is not working. I apologize. I'll take one off the top. The view of VR, AR, non-phone based, so not Pokemon adoption when 3D glasses for TV and Google didn't take off. If you can talk about the 3D glasses piece in particular, and I've heard hype about, Apple may have, some glasses coming out sometime soon too.
Yeah, I think with Google Glass, apart from, there were several different aspects, right? There was the technological aspect, but there was also a social aspect of how a lot of those devices were perceived, the price point, and the readiness of the technology and the market overall. Over a period of time, I think AR glasses are likely to evolve into something that can be and would be available in a form factor where it would not appear as something, an appendage to your glasses, but your glasses would probably function like an AR device in itself. And have the ability to either completely occlude and function as a VR device, or enhance your vision by augmenting it with other information. It would, again, take maybe 10 to 15 years to get there, but that's when I think the social acceptance aspect of it, the technology readiness aspect of it, the price point aspect of it need to be addressed for it to become a mass consumer device.
I'm going to take one more question just because I think this one's interesting, and it goes to a conversation we were having in the speaker ready room earlier, which is where does VR and data science overlap?
So let me make sure if I understand the question. So by VR and data science overlapping, you mean the concept of data science and?
So, and let me add to some of the flavor of the conversation earlier, which was sort of the idea of machine learning and AI, and putting the two technologies together. Where's the overlap, and I'll add, where are the opportunities?
So if you were to look at how these underlying technologies work, right, they need to, for an augmented reality system to work really well, it needs to understand its space really well, be able to semantically distinguish between, with pixel accuracy, where there's a chair end and various planes in this in the view, and a lot of machine learning and computer vision techniques will go into trying to do that semantic segmentation of the space, and then augment it on top of it. In addition to that, there's a lot of synthetic mechanisms that are being used as well, where you can scan a lot of different spaces, which can follow certain patterns, and then train your real-time algorithms to get better at doing the semantic segmentation. So there's definitely lots of different ways of looking at deep learning. At Matterport, for example, the camera itself comes with a depth sensor, so that helps us with reconstructing the model, but we can apply deep learning techniques to understand whether the space that was scanned, is it a church, is it a cathedral, is it a home, is it a place of work, and then also distinguish between the purpose of the rooms based on the furniture by detecting the objects in the space, give you more information about the square footage of the various rooms, and lots of such additional applications that we can build by using deep learning techniques, and then use the results in a VR or AR type of an experience.
Yeah, one way we're using it is to make sense of campaigns for marketers, and how to, by assessing consumer behavior and how they interact with content, be able to better understand how to deploy these campaigns and make predictive suggestions as to if they want more engagement or driving more sales or understanding or a variety of other objectives to be able to harness that information and use it for specific objectives.
Just to add two things that I just thought of. From our perspective, we do controller tracking, hand tracking and such. And so typically we look for some active markers to do that. But there is also, something that, we're looking at in the roadmap where we're looking at collecting a series of these images of different positions and poses, and then using that information to now quickly predict how your hand is positioned in space. So that's, one aspect, and same thing like, what Ashish mentioned also about trying to do feature recognition based on the previous information, and also depending on how users interact with their, their environment, their immersive environment, we can also kind of study and use this to improve our prediction accuracy of how, we're predicting their movements.
I think we're very much out of time now. Thank you, and we'll turn it over to the next panel.
Thank you. Thank you.